Hi, this is Beth from Around the Table Yarns, and today we're going to go over some of the tricks and tips for the Poet socks from Sari Nordlund. Information about Sock Club can be found on our website under Sock Club for December 25th, 2022. And again, we're doing the Poet socks from Sari Nordlund. And this is an illustration of the socks or a picture of the socks from my pattern. As you can see, this is a lace, stockinette, and seed stitch combination. These socks are worked from a tubular cast on to some ribbing and then down the leg in the pattern, and then a normal heel, nice strong heel, and then a gusset, and then you'll work the pattern on top of the socks, not underneath, to the toe. So what I want to do first is demonstrate the technique of the tubular cast on in the round. I'm going to be demonstrating it on magic loop, and then it works the same for double pointed needles or two circulars. And then I'm going to look at the chart with you briefly and discuss some of the parts of the chart that I think you should know and I want to bring to your attention. Okay, so the tubular cast on for these socks is worked by casting on 30 stitches with the long tail cast on, or really any method that you are comfortable with, although I think that the backwards loop method is probably not going to be helpful. So you want to do a knitted cast on or a long tail cast on ideally. And then it says in the pattern instructions to join in the round. There's not really anywhere to join yet. Because one, you're not going to work with the waste yarn, you're going to be working with the main yarn. So don't join in the round here. Skip that section, break the waste yarn, and continue to tubular round one. So don't feel like you have to do the joining in the round immediately. So if you go to tubular round one, and I've only cast on 10 stitches because I wanted to be able to demonstrate this without having to do a whole new sock. So when I bring in my main yarn, so my waste yarn is orange, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to knit one, and then I'm going to bring the yarn forward between the needles, carry it over the needle to the back, and knit the next stitch. Yarn forward, so the yarn over is just this technique of moving the yarn forward between the needles and over, and that makes a second stitch. So it's not anchored on anything. It would be an eyelet if you were doing this in the round, and that's actually how lace work gets made. But what it's doing is doubling the number of stitches that I cast on. So I come to the end of that round, and now I'm going to join it in the round. So yarn over, I knit the last one, and then there will be another yarn over there. So I'm going to separate my stitches. So I'm going to separate them in half, just like you would if you'd cast on the correct number. So if you'd cast on 30 stitches, now you would count off 30. So I cast on 10. Now I have 20 or almost 20. There should be a yarn over there, but we're going to leave that off for the minute. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 from the finished left side. I'm going to move all of those stitches onto the cable, or you could slip them from this end of your double pointed needle onto another double pointed needle. But I want 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I should have 9 on the other side. 3, 6, 9. Yes. So I'm going to bend my cable there to bring it out for magic loop. Okay. I want my working yarn attached to the right. I always think of it as the right hand rear corner. So I think of this as a little box, and that's the right hand rear corner, the corner furthest away from me. My tails are all messy and loose attached to the front needle. And I'm going to put my yarn over the back needle and push my front needle into those 10 front stitches. So remember, I still only have 9 stitches on my back needle, but I have the yarn laying over the cable there. So round 2, tubular round 2 says slip 1 with yarn in back. It's always going to be a slip 1 purlwise. So slip 1 purlwise, WYIB, with yarn in back, and then purl 1. And you're going to repeat that. So you're going to work these 10 stitches in pairs, slipping 1 with yarn in back, moving the yarn to the front to purl, moving the yarn to the back to slip, and so on. So this is how I did it the first time. I'm going to bring the yarn over the back needle and onto the front needle, just like that. I'm going to slip the first stitch off and then let that yarn come between the needles, ready for me to purl. Give it a little tug and purl that first stitch. Now move it to the back. So now it's making a yarn over, and it's not making a yarn over on the first stitch. Move it to the back, slip, yarn forward, purl, move it to the back, slip 1, move it to the front, purl 1. Oh, lost it. Move it to the back, slip 1, front, purl 1, back, slip 1, and the last stitch will be a purl 1 on each side. So I finish that, I turn to the other side, or I insert the next double pointed needle. In this case, I'm moving my front stitches into position on the front needle. And I'm going to, again, bring my yarn over the front needle so that I can slip this first stitch off purlwise, like that, and then bring the yarn between the needle to purl the first stitch. So that, in effect, slips the yarn with the yarn in back, slips the first stitch with the yarn in back. Just a smidge. So the stitches that you are purling are the yarn overs. So we come to the last one and it's kind of loose. So I'm going to purl into the front of it, which will help twist it. If you want to adjust a little bit, you can pull a little bit on your tails as you come to the end of this round. And then we're going to turn. So we've done round 1 and 2. And now we're going to do round 3. And this is the finish of the tubular rounds, the finish of the tubular setup. So I'm pushing my stitches back onto my needle. I'm getting ready to do the last one. This time I'm going to knit the first stitch. So I move my yarn over my back cable to get in position so that when I go into the first stitch, the working yarn carries from the back stitch around the right needle without any extra slack. Now I'm going to move the yarn forward and slip one, move the yarn back and knit one. I'm going to do that for each stitch on this, each of the pairs of stitches on this side. Ending with a slip one with the yarn in front. Turn, the yarn is still being slipped in front, even though it feels a little loose, it's still in the correct position. Put that over the needle to hold it while you get in position to knit the first stitch. Again, as you bring it, once you lay the working yarn over the cable like that, then when you go in position to knit it, it's not wrapping and making an extra stitch around the cable. So again, I'm knitting and then yarn forward and slipping, yarn back and knitting to the end of the round. So this is the end of tubular round 3. And when you get all the way to the end, so you've knit the second to last stitch, and then you slip the last stitch off, and just carrying the yarn back around is enough to carry it in front of that stitch. Now I'm going to begin ribbing round 1. And in ribbing round 1, I just do the same thing. I move my stitches into place, position the correct needle. It's a knit stitch first, so the yarn goes over the top of the needle. And then I'm going to knit 1, purl 1. And now I've established my ribbing. So now I work every stitch, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, turn to do the other half. Position it on the fronts of the needles. I always rest my yarn above the needle like that so that I can start, if I'm starting with a knit stitch. Otherwise you would not do that. You would bring it forward. Okay, when the ribbing is completed, you'll have done about 1.5 inches of ribbing, or however much you want. And you can use the tail to tighten up any looseness right at the beginning of the cast on. But once this part of the ribbing is done, once you've done tubular rounds 1 through 3, you can actually get rid of the waste yarn. And the way that I do that is I honestly just pick it out. So you just can pick all of those stitches out one by one. And what is left is it's essentially a little tiny tube that you've knitted. You've made a little 3-row section of double-faced fabric at the top of your sock. And so the stitches look essentially like they've rolled over the edge. And you can see that right there, how they have this sort of rolled appearance at the top of the sock. So it makes for an edging that's very similar to a machine knit sock. This is the same structure of edge that you would find in a machine knit sock, and those can be less binding than hand knit socks. Sometimes our cast-ons for hand knit socks are very tight. And so this edging gives you a not tight edging for the top of your socks, and it's nice for people who are uncomfortable if their socks are too tight. And then as you can see, pulling out the other yarn, I could cut this shorter as I was going. You know, I would have more stitches if I were doing this for real. So there it goes. That's all gone. And now there's my lovely little stretchy in the round edging that looks like there's a little tube on the edge. So there's the tubular cast on. Here's my sock already in progress. And I just want to point out to you a couple of things about the stitch pattern on this sock. So I'm going to show you part of the leg chart. This is written out for both the leg and the instep lace in detail. So I'm just, whoa, look at all that writing. I'm not going to stop it because I don't have copyright to this pattern. But I just want to show you, this is this beautiful lace patterning that we're going to be doing. So we're going to start right away, and notice here that this is seed stitch. So the first thing that actually happens is that you're going to change the first stitch. So the first stitch when I cast on was this knit stitch here. And I moved it to the back needle. So I just slipped it off and moved it onto the back needle when I got done with my ribbing. And that made this stitch my first stitch. So you would just simply transfer the first stitch to the previous needle. If you're working, again, double pointed, magic loop, or two circulars, you would just transfer this one to the other needle, the needle that preceded it. And then you'd work the 29 stitches. And when you get to the end, you'd work one more and then move that to this same needle so that you would restore 30 stitches, and the other side will also have 30. The pattern repeat for the leg is based on 20 stitches. So I have set up my 20 stitches, placed a marker, worked 10. The back of my leg has 10 stitches for the pattern, and then again 20 more. So the reason we changed that first stitch was so that we could line up the first seed stitch over the purl rib, and then you're just following the pattern along. In the leg chart, blank squares are knit, the circle is a purl, a slash to the left is an SSK, a slash to the right is a knit two together. So an SSK is to slip as though to knit, slip as though to knit, and then knit those two stitches together. A knit two together is just to work, put your needle in. Hi, Bonnie. I'm recording the sock class. I had an issue with my recording, so I just muted you for a minute while I finish doing this. Okay, so we're back at the leg chart. So knit two together. This circle, the open circle, is a yarn over. And then in the chart, it says MR1 and ML for make one right and make one left. But actually, that is not used in this chart at all. So the leg chart doesn't have it at all. And in the instep chart, where that happens, where there is a make one left and a make one right, you can see these branched figures here. That's what the chart symbol is. So the branch to the left is the make one left, and the branch to the right is the make one right. So you should just know that. The other thing is I've highlighted on here. One, I suggest you use markers between the repeats. And then I've found several places, and I will tell you the rounds, round 2, round 10, round 14, round 18, round 38, and round 42. There are yarn overs next to a purl. So there's a knit, a yarn over a purl, a yarn over a knit. And up here, there's a knit, a yarn over a purl, a knit, a purl, a knit, a purl, and then a yarn over. So when you are going from a purl stitch to a knit stitch with a yarn over in between, I prefer and I recommend a full yarn over between those stitches. So I wanted to demonstrate that. And that looks like this. So if I were going to knit a stitch and then do a yarn over before a purl stitch, normally when you do a yarn over, you just bring the yarn forward. But if I do that and then I purl, there's no stitch made. There's no extra stitch made there. So if I bring the yarn forward and then wrap it over the needle and back forward, I've made one full wrap around my right hand needle. And then when I purl, it makes a third stitch. It makes the stitch, which is what you're trying to do. Now, if I'm purling and I'm about to knit a stitch, I could just put my needle into the knit stitch without moving my yarn to the back, and I could wrap it around. But notice how different that yarn over is in its length to the one we made here. This one wrapped all the way a full revolution around the needle. This one is only going from the back to the front, so it's only going half as far as the one we made between the knit stitch and the purl. So I do it a different way, and I'm just throwing it out there for you because some people get bothered if their stitches are different sizes. And if you make the yarn over with half as much yarn, it will be a different size. So before, we brought the yarn forward as if to purl, wrapped over the needle, and then came back forward to go all the way around. This time we're just going to go the other way. We're going to take it backwards as if to knit, forward over the needle, and back again. So it's the same revolution, but it is a backwards twist around the needle. But if you do that between your purls and your knits, the yarn overs will be essentially the same size, and your lace will look even or more even. So that's just a tip that I feel like is important. It's not hugely important, but it's one of those little things. So that's pretty much all of the instruction for this pattern. The pattern is fairly straightforward. A little review for those of you who have not worked with charts that much, that charts are written as the fabric to look like the fabric looked at from the right side. So you would be reading this chart from the bottom row up towards the top. You would be reading it from the right-hand side towards the left in the direction of your knitting. Again, we're going to move stitch 1 off of the needle. So your original stitch 1 will go as the last stitch on the other needle. And you'll start, the new beginning of round will be above a purl stitch. So there will be a purl below this one. And then you'll start with a knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 6, purl 1, knit 6, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and then you begin again at the beginning of this row. I place a marker here so you can see on my, there's 20 stitches and a marker, and then 10 more stitches and a marker, and then the last 20 stitches. So I've done that. So, and I've used 2 different color markers. so that I know if I am on the front side or the beginning of my round or the end of my round. I've made a visual differentiation between the two markers. Also, this one comes towards the end and this one comes towards the beginning when I'm on that side. So I can visually look down and see where I am and whether I'm beginning a round or doing a repeat, or I'm still doing repeats. I hope this is very helpful. The next time we do the poet socks, we will be working on the heel and the transition to the instep. So I look forward to that in a month with you all, and I hope you have a good night.